Cooper Kupp is back, but will we also get Puka Nacua back? That's coming up next on a crossover edition of Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramily, and what is up, Vikings fans? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams and Locked On Vikings, a crossover edition. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMac_LA. I'm covering LA sports, the NFL for over a decade. SI 24/7 Sports, Bleacher Report, Dodgers Nation. Also do radio for Westwood One as their NFL studio host. And of course, I'm joined by Luke Braun. You can follow him at Luke Braun NFL, the host of Locked On Vikings. And on today's episode, we are previewing the Vikings, Rams, with the Thursday night football matchup. And can this Rams team get back on track? Will Cooper Kupp be a factor? We're also going to talk about Matthew Stafford and a trade possibility. We're going to get into all that. But first, this crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDON to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, Luke. So the Vikings, one of the surprise, really good teams this season. The Rams have gone up to a slow start. Last year, they started 3-6. Then somehow, some way, they got to 10 wins. They were a surprise playoff team. They beat the Raiders last week. They're trying to continue that momentum with Cooper Kupp back on Thursday. Your Vikings coming off a tough loss to the Lions, but they've been one of the surprise teams all year. But my question to you is, how surprised are you considering you know the ins and outs of this team? Are you surprised, or is this kind of what you thought was going to happen?
No, I mean, there are a lot of Vikings fans that like saw this coming, that'll predict that they'll win at least 10 games every single year. No, I thought they were going to be pretty bottom tier this year. I thought this was kind of a transition year. They're eating a bunch of dead cap from old contracts and from kind of the Kirk Cousins thing. They're transitioning out of it, rookie QB, and I thought that this was sort of meant to be a bit of a growing pains year, and it's okay. We're going to kind of take one off. We'll have a Sam Darnold year, and then JJ McCarthy gets hurt, and it felt even worse. And then they just like scream out to this 5-0 lead, this 5-0 start. So yeah, I've been. The standard that I set before the year was, man, if they could beat the 49ers, I'll believe. And then they beat the 49ers and like they looked a lot better than the 49ers. I was like, okay, well, here we are. I believe now.
Yeah, and that's really kind of where it's at right now. I mean, you're rolling. You got Sam Darnold, who has bounced around. He's with the Jets, where he was seeing ghosts, and he was with Carolina. Mm-hmm. People wondering, wait, how is Sam Darnold having so much success? And I think you look at better talent around him, a better coach around him. But even so, there was rumors starting to emerge earlier this week that the Rams were, quote, in serious talks with the Vikings about a potential Matthew Stafford trade. I had a difficult time even addressing these rumors just because it was an unverified source. It was kind of one of those hashtag trust me, bro sources. Mm-hmm. And then today we got some more fruitful information, some substantiated information from Ben Gonsling, who tweeted out checking in on Matthew Stafford to the Vikings rumors. I've been getting lots of questions about. Source said there's zero truth to the idea that the Vikings are trying to trade for him. So we know that the trade rumor was bogus, but is Sam Darnold the guy for this team?
Yeah, for this year, yes. I think the plan has always been that 2024 will be the Sam Darnold year. And then, we'll move on after that. We'll go to JJ McCarthy. So it's kind of been Darnold's playing for someone else's money. So, he'll hit free agency, and the better he plays, the bigger contract that'll be. But yeah, Gessling, puts the kibosh on the Stafford thing. Ben Gessling in Minnesota is kind of our lead Vikings guy for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. It's the leading paper in Minneapolis. So that's a much more trustworthy source than anything you'll find from random fantasy accounts or from Mike Florio, who will run with anything, whether he can confirm it or not. That was all. I mean, it never really passed the smell test anyways, right? I talked about it a lot actually on yesterday's Locked On Vikings, if Rams fans want to listen to that. But Darnold has been a much more mature Sam Darnold. That's what I always say on these crossovers when everybody asks me, whoa, where'd this guy come from? When he went to San Francisco last year, I think being a backup and being able to watch Brock Purdy play safe ball a little bit, kind of get out of those bad situations and get to a check down and then walk to the sideline. And even if they punt it on third down, everybody's going, hey, good play. That's what we take on those. And going, wow, I don't actually have to hero ball all the time. That kind of chilled him out a little bit, and you've seen a little bit more safe play from Darnold. It's not all out of him. He's still got a little bit of that hero ball in him, and he'll do some dumb things. You will get a dumb turnover in this game. Like you can set your watch by it. You will get an idiot turnover from Sam Darnold in this game. But it's not 5 of them, so it's survivable, and you can still stay in that, So it's chilled out a little bit, and then some of that natural talent that got him drafted 3rd overall starts to take over. He can throw it to any level on the field. You have to cover every blade of grass. He's very opportunistic. Tiny little mistakes in your secondary, if they're just flat-footed for a little too long or they work the wrong way, he'll see that and maybe even pull out of the progression to throw it, and that has led to some of the most electrifying moments on the Vikings offense. That same like brain cell that says, "Ooh, I can throw that improvisationally," also tells him that, but like wrong. It's like the devil and the angel on his shoulder. So it'll lead to turnovers. It leads to big plays. It leads to exciting ball one way or another. But it's going to be this big swingy back and forth thing. That's kind of what they've all been, unless you get this like avalanche at the beginning of the game, like there was against Houston, and then it's over by the second quarter.
Yeah, and I think when you look at Sam Darnold and his USC days, that's what made him such an enticing prospect. A guy that made plays out of structure, a guy that could find ways to take risks, and sometimes those risks kind of bite him. But I mean, you look at Kevin O'Connell, I think it's very evident that this is someone that could be in the mix for Coach of the Year, and he's one of the best play callers in the NFL. Of course, Rams fans are very familiar with him as the Rams' former offensive coordinator. And I think that, the interesting thing with him is he can just make quarterbacks successful. He can make them effective. I mean, I remember hearing the story about Josh Dobbs, and he didn't know any of his teammates' names. And O'Connell's in his headset before snap saying, you're going to go here, you're going to go there, and then right before, and then he makes a play. So that's definitely a credit to him as well. Now, on the Rams side, you do have Matthew Stafford. You have someone who is an established quarterback, a Super Bowl winning quarterback, but unfortunately, he has not been going into games with the best talent around him. He's kind of going to war with butter knives, so to speak. Kind of that's been one of the themes with the Rams this season. You have practice squad players that are expected to be backups and backups that are expected to be starters. And you've seen this affect Matthew Stafford. He doesn't have Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp for most of this season. You have a DeMarcus Robinson who's really a number 4 receiver that's asked to be a 1 or a 2. Colby Parkinson, the tight end they signed from after he was with Seattle. I mean, he was supposed to be this big red zone threat. The Rams have been one of the worst red zone teams in the NFL. So the big hopes for Rams fans this Thursday is that with the return of Cooper Kupp,
and I'm hearing there's a good chance that the Rams get Puka Nacua back as well. So you get your top 2 receivers back, and just think of how that would jumpstart this Rams offense. So you got to feel really good if you're a Rams fan if you get those 2 guys back, and then you'll start to see the Matthew Stafford that we saw towards the latter portions of last season. We know the arm talent is still there, and he's just a very different quarterback when he doesn't have the same weapons around him. So just getting both those guys back in the same game against a really good Vikings team, I can't overstate how massive that could be for this offense.
But coming up next, we're diving into this KOC Sean McVay matchup. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
This episode of Locked On Rams and Locked On Vikings is brought to you by ZBiotics. ZBiotics is a pre-alcohol like hangover prevention thing. So the idea is you take it before you take it with your first drink. You drink responsibly, still drink plenty of water, stay hydrated and all that. And hopefully you'll wake up feeling a little bit healthier before. I can't really knock them back like I used to. So this is the kind of thing that is absolutely helpful for me. If you want to get in on that kind of thing, you can go to zbiotics.com/lockedonnfl and you can get 15% off of your first order when you use the code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money back guaranteed. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedonnfl and use the code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout for 15% off. Moving right along here on Crossover Thursday on Locked On Vikings and Locked On Rams. here with Doug McCain of Locked On Rams. I'm Luke Braun. I do Locked On Vikings. This is an interesting moment for Kevin O'Connell because he's returning to SoFi Stadium for the first time. The last game that Kevin O'Connell had anything to do with here in SoFi was, because I don't think they played the Chargers at SoFi. No, yeah, that was at US Bank. So the last time he played here was a Super Bowl. And now it's O'Connell and McVay. So how do you feel about this mentor-mentee thing? And how has Sean McVay changed since that time? I know things have been a lot different for, playing with Stafford and playing, with and without Cooper Kupp and all these guys. So how is Sean McVay different since the last time the Vikings saw him, which was back in 2021, and the last time Kevin O'Connell saw him, which was that year's Super Bowl?
The number one biggest difference in Sean McVay now from then is that he's taken more of a CEO type approach. He's a little less hands-on when it comes to offensively, but he's still heavily involved. But you have LaFleur heavily involved as far as running the overall offense. And you look at Sean McVay hired one of his best friends in Chris Shula to take over Raheem Morris's defense, and they've had their ups and downs. Last week, they got 4 takeaways. You've seen improvement from this defense all season long, especially with the return of Darius Williams and Trey White. They end up benching Kobe Durant's where he turned around. But I think with Sean McVay, the big difference is after 2021, it was the Super Bowl hangover from hell. They were decimated by injuries. The whole season was like a season of Squid Game, right? I mean, just injury after injury. And the thing about that year is it looked like Sean McVay was done. There was all these rumors that he was going to take on a big TV deal, be an analyst, and leave the Rams. And all of a sudden, he recommits, he's re-energized. And I think that Sean McVay realizes at this point that you're not going to create that juice that you get from head coaching outside of head coaching, outside of being in the NFL. And I think he's here for the long term, even if it means a rebuild after this season or even during this season. So I think the big difference between Sean McVay now, as far as just how he runs his ship, is yes, he's still extremely hands-on, but he's also a little more comfortable in delegating at this stage of his career.
It's maybe a little bit more of a sustainable Sean McVay, because obviously the stress of the job was really getting to him. But the other question I have to ask everybody on all of these crossovers, what's the plan for Justin Jefferson? When you see a team that has such a clear-cut number one, that's such a threat as Justin Jefferson is, we've seen teams try to man cover him. We've seen teams just focus on bracketing him and leaving one-on-ones elsewhere on the field. What are the Rams going to be comfortable with?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those things that's still a bend but don't break style of defense, but still you want to limit those explosive plays. And Chris Shula's gotten really creative in the last couple of weeks. You saw some creative things in the last game from the defensive backs. You saw Cam Curl blitzing more. Durant was used in that role in the slot, and he was thriving right there. And the thing about Durant is he had a really good offseason, and somebody that was actually coaching him consistently kind of turned the corner with him. So really you're kind of looking at a cornerback room with Darius Williams and Kobe Durant that's just trying to limit those explosive plays and also trying to get better production from those middle linebackers. That has been the area where you can exploit over the middle with those crossing routes. So I think with Justin Jefferson, he's kind of one of those guys where, you can try to get a little more physical. You can try to find a way
That's the only thing that's been remotely successful is physical coverage, but you're going to get a lot of flags doing that too. So is that even worth it? You're going to give up a lot of free first downs.
And that's kind of one of those things that they're going to try to do is they're going to try to pick their spots where they can be a little aggressive with them. But this Rams defense knows that they're not going to shut opponents out, especially explosive offenses. So really the onus comes on the offensive side of the football with Kyren Williams in this offensive running game. Can you go out there and run the ball? Can you control some clock? But it's Justin Jefferson. But the good thing though, if you look at Kobe Durant, Kobe Durant has really emerged. Darius Williams has really turned the corner for this Rams secondary, but it's Justin Jefferson. You can't stop him. You can only hope to contain him. But I do think with guys like Quentin Lake and kind of what they do when he kind of goes over the middle, you got to try to be a little physical kind of at the line of scrimmage and when their opportunity presents itself.
FanDuel over-under on this one is 48.5. Vikings favored by 2.5 now. It has moved from 3, so take that for whatever you will. But yeah, that does sort of, for Thursday night, that's a pretty high over under. So I wonder, the betting public maybe expects a little bit more scoring in this one than you would usually see on Thursday night football. Obviously, the short week is another part of this, especially with both of these teams like kind of trying to get a little bit healthier. But on that Rams defense, I guess, is Darius Williams, is that the guy that like I don't know about that I should know about, or is there somebody else? And in particular, in run defense, who do the Rams really trust to keep Aaron Jones from running all over them? Obviously, it's a totally different world for the Rams with no Aaron Donald in the middle. Who takes up not literally that mantle? Nobody can, but who does this thing rely on now? Who's the load-bearing pillar?
Really, it starts with Kobe Turner. I mean, he up front and this Rams defensive front, they really have brought a lot of pressure this season. And guys like Jared Verse, their number 19 pick out of Florida State, he's already emerged as one of the top 3, top 4, top 5 edge rushers in the sport. But as far as dependable tacklers go, has to be a guy like Quentin Lake. They use him in the star role. He can play box and he can get in that really defensive scheme where you're really going out there making plays from different levels. So really, I think when it comes to Darius Williams, it's just kind of more your boundary corner, trying to keep things in front of him and kind of limit those big plays. But really, it's kind of as far as, look, you don't replace an Aaron Donald, right? I mean, this is Hulk. Right, this is Hulk in football cleats out there, right? You can't replace him, but it has been impressive to see the kind of pressure that they've got. I mean, the problem is with this Rams defense is they're 5th in pressure, but they're 5th lowest when it comes to actually sacks, right? So kind of the big key is, can they finish the job and get in that backfield and try to wreak havoc? And I mean, look, this is going to be a big test. I mean, they've played good teams this season. They played the offenses that you really thought were going to be some of the top offenses in the sport: Detroit and Green Bay, San Francisco, even minus some of their big playmakers. And they have done a decent job keeping the Rams in this one, but it's just about getting to that fourth quarter, those final 5 minutes, just finishing. I mean, 3 of their 4 losses this year have come with less than a touchdown. So really defensively, you saw 4 takeaways. And also Jalen McCullough is another guy who's really emerged. Kobe Durant has emerged. So as far as the confidence with this defense, kind of the big theme for this team is young players kind of taking that next step. And a lot of them have. But the question is, how quickly can you accelerate that to really make them a true strong suit for this team?
And then to go from the young to the old, how's Matt Stafford doing? Statistically, the offense hasn't had the output that you would expect from a Sean McVay, Matt Stafford offense and all that. And my understanding is that a lot of that's not his fault. The offensive line is basically a shell of its former self. You got the threes out there a lot of the time. And that, you've had Cooper Kupp hurt, Puka Nacua hurt, so he's working with a lot of backups. But in terms of how Matt Stafford is doing, one of the main questions, especially with that rumor, was would we really rather have Matt Stafford than Sam Darnold? Or is he to a point in his career where maybe that's not true anymore?
The thing with Matthew Stafford is you still see the flashes, the big-time throws. He can still make all the throws. You see the nice sidearm throws, but really it's about lack of protection, giving him time to really hit guys downfield. And the guys that are trying to hit downfield really aren't those upper echelon receivers that they've had in the past. If you kind of look at his PFF grade, he's 27 out of 28 quarterbacks, at least 139 dropbacks. So, I mean, you look at his overall production, he just had one of his lowest outputs in his career. They were just 154 yards in the last game. He has 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. So we haven't seen the Matthew Stafford that was a Pro Bowler, that was a Super Bowl winning quarterback. But the truth of the matter is it's tough to evaluate him just because of the talent that's been around him. And also just the emphasis on the run game to try to make sure that he stays vertical, stays upright, and stays out of harm's way while they kind of get their key cogs back. So as far as could Matthew Stafford help you win a Super Bowl this year? I truly think he could. I still think on his best day, as far as pure arm talent, he's a top 5 to 10 quarterback in the sport. It's been a little complicated this year with this Rams team because, look, not only they're playing without playmakers, you went out there and you signed a Jonah Jackson. He was their big off-season, big ticket item, and he's been dealing with a shoulder injury all season. Last year, you had Steve Avila. He was their rookie guard sensation, and he's missed this season. You're playing with backups at center. You're playing with left tackles and guards that aren't used to being in there. So it's just been kind of a patchwork job, and it's really limited his opportunities. But I still think that you look at last season when the Rams started 3-6, and then they took off in the second part of the year. That was because Matthew Stafford got going. So hopefully you get the win against the Raiders. Thursday night, last year, their Thursday night win over the Saints really launched them into the last part of the season where they were able to be that surprise playoff team. And this year, look, the Vikings, great team, great start, but the Rams are kind of looking at this and saying, look, if we win, you look at the NFC West,
right?
You're
so you're
tied for
3 and 4, and you're like, we're like one game out of this. Yeah, we're like looking at wild card position. Yeah,
exactly.
So I mean, it's a long season. Yeah, it's a long season, and a 2-4 start. I mean, a 2-6 start didn't keep them out of the playoffs last year. So who's to say a 2-4 start should? And I think that's absolutely the right attitude to have. But what this game actually boils down to is what we're going to try to dive into next on this Crossover Thursday episode on the Locked On Podcast Network.
Now let's talk about FanDuel. NFL fans, you could start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Of course, America's #1 sportsbook. If you get a hunch in the middle of the game and you think now may be a great time to get in there, you can check out all the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play. And of course, there's so much more on the same page where you're placing your bets. So we're going to get you started. FanDuel with $200 in bonus bets. That's guaranteed when you play your first $5 bet. Let me say it again. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And the Rams this week, a 3-point underdog against the Vikings at SoFi Stadium. And there's much more available over at FanDuel. So go check that out at FanDuel.com. Download the FanDuel app on your phone, and they're going to get you started with $200 in bonus bucks guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And we are back on another crossover edition of Locked On Rams and Locked On Vikings. I want to send a special shout out to those everyday listeners out there watching and listening to every single episode of Locked On Rams and Locked On Vikings. Cannot thank you enough. And if you haven't yet, join that everyday listeners club. Now, Luke, you got to feel pretty confident heading into this one, but Thursday night, it can get weird. This Rams team still has a ton of talent. They're going to get that charge with Mr. Cooper Kupp back in the active. But, I mean, what are your thoughts heading into this one? Do you have a feel as far as a prediction goes?
Yeah, so Locked On Vikings fans hear me say this every crossover Thursday. I don't really love doing score predictions. I think most of the time you're picking a number arbitrarily. But I'll work this via the FanDuel odds, right? I think 2.5 points is, in terms of a spread, maybe shorter than Vikings fans anticipated. But you got to remember, you're on the road. Thursday night's an equalizer. They're getting talent back. The Vikings have not been confirmed to be getting their talent back, even though probably that's not going to be reflected in the betting market. So, the market sees this as maybe a 4 or 5-ish point difference on a neutral field. I think that's probably appropriate, but it would be such a mistake to overlook this one just because the Rams have been off to a slow start and have had a couple of spicy losses and have had some injuries and are dealing with all of that. Because the ultimate, the snag here, and I think this is what this really comes down to, is if Matt Stafford is on and he's able to find those holes in the zone over the middle that will be there with the Brian Flores defense. It's just a natural part of it. There will be holes in the middle. You can hit dagger all day long. You can hit drift all day long. You can hit whatever you want over the middle. If Stafford is on, he's feeling that. If the blitzes aren't getting home, the Rams are going to be able to move the ball. Forget Kyron Williams. You're going to be able to get 25-yard chunks a lot. That's the way that Jared Goff did it with the Lions last week. If the Vikings can knock that rhythm away, then I don't really see what other ideas the Rams have. So I kind of see it as there's a plan A, but I don't know what else the Rams have to really turn to. But what do you think this one comes down to?
I think that you're going to see a Vikings team that we've seen this season. They bring a ton of pressure. They blitz 122 times this season. That's 19 more than any other team. And you look at a 42.5% blitz rate, and it's the highest in the league. That's 5% higher than anyone. And the Rams, they struggle with that at times. And if you can get to Matthew Stafford and he's on the ground, then you turn to Kyron Williams. And then I look at the Vikings. They're one of the best teams in the NFL, second fewest rushing yards per game allowed. I mean, you look at where this team's at, they're going to rely on Kyron Williams in this one. So that is something that scares me, is if you get to Matthew Stafford and then you look at the fact that this is a really good Vikings team at stopping the run. I mean, Vikings, they're in the NFL, 24 sacks, Rams 27 with 11. So there's a lot of things you can point to as far as clear-cut advantages that the Vikings have, which isn't a surprise when you have the record that they have and the Rams have the record that they have. But I do think that the Rams are kind of looking at this game as, look, if we don't win this game, then we could be staring at multiple trades at the deadline. We could be looking down the barrel of the beginning of a rebuild. So I was, to be honest with you, man, I was watching the Vikings-Lions game, and I was hoping that the Vikings would win that one just because now it's going to be a situation where they're coming off a tough loss and they want to redeem themselves against a team that they view as really one of the worst teams in the NFL based on their record. Also, I mean, look, if you look at the teams that have lost to the Lions have struggled the following week, and it's a short.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah, like they're on a short week. Yeah, it's like it's a physical team, and they're beat up and they're bruised, and then they got a short week. It's a difficult challenge, I think, physically, just to like get into another game there. On the rushing defense too, part of the reason they've given up fewer rushing yards is because they've faced fewer rushing plays. They've been ahead in a lot of games, and a lot of teams have been chasing it, so you don't get a lot of running. But even after you adjust for that from like an efficiency, like EPA perspective, yards per rush, that kind of thing, they're still in the top 5. So it's like exacerbated, but not that exacerbated. But I guess like I look at these games and I think of like, what's the path to the win, right? Then for the Vikings, I see a whole bunch of different ones that it could be. I could see, oh, this is a Justin Jefferson 180 yards game. That's a path for the win. Or this is a game where they rack up a ton of sacks on Matt Stafford. That's a path to the win, right? Because they've got Van Ginkel playing great, Jonathan Grenard playing great, and the Rams have had all these offensive line issues. I see like these paths to the win. And for the Rams, I see if Stafford could like solo will them to one, like this could be one of those. I see that path to the win, and I don't know if I see any others, but I don't know. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Look, I mean, you're absolutely correct. I mean, this team, they live and die with Matthew Stafford's production at times. And I also think there's some interesting things about this Vikings defense as well. I mean, you look at the fact that they have 11 interceptions this season. That leads the NFL, but they've allowed the third most passing yards, right? So that tells you there's opportunities there to kind of fill it up in through the air. But really the biggest key for this team is, look, they've had bad turnovers in bad spots. I mean, look at the Packers game. Both those turnovers led to touchdowns. If you can play clean football, avoid turnovers, Matthew Stafford, Sean McVay at home at SoFi Stadium, really with the game to almost keep their season alive, you have to feel good about their chances at the very least of staying in this one. And if they stay in this one late, you saw last week, this is a defense that hasn't. Yeah, I mean, they created turnovers, right? And that's something that we're not used to in the last year. And they've kind of gotten on this roll, McCullough and Kobe Durant, and their ability to kind of create pressure and create some turnovers. The biggest key, though, is like you just don't want to have this Vikings team explode offensively because this Rams team isn't built for big explosives to make big comebacks. I mean, you're going to see a lot of long, methodical drives from this team. You're not going to see them take the top off the defense with massive explosive plays. Even when Kyron Williams is rushing well, it's not like he's going to the house, right? You're saying 20,
no, you're getting 5 a pop, and it's responsible, and you're converting 3rd and 4s, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so that's the I mean, red zone efficiency too. I mean, it's 24th in the NFL in red zone efficiency, and hopefully you get Cooper Kupp back. I mean, look, we know the back shoulder fade is definitely not a play that a lot of people like, but when it comes to Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp executing that play, it's definitely a weapon in the red zone. So yeah, I mean, you got to hope that you're getting some TNF juice, right? The
equalizers. The Lions hangover thing, the Thursday night equalizer thing. Like the Rams are drawing this game at a good time.
I'm interested in that. I like this Lions. That's for some reason that's kind of my number one right now. I like this Lions hangover thing.
Maybe they just come out flat and it's just this uncharacteristic game and what happened to everybody. Because of that stuff, I don't feel as good as I think I would if this game were just like a nooner on Sunday. But I still I don't think that means the Rams should be favored or anything like that. Like, I think the spread is at an appropriate place for going on the road for all of these equalizers have brought it in. And it's one of these games that it's like, if you feel like you're a Super Bowl contender, Vikings, you should go take this one. But I can see why the Rams are going to be feisty, and I still see them as maybe a little bit banged up, but I still kind of view them as that playoff team that they were last year, not so much a 2-4 team, that belongs in the cellars of the NFC. There's a lot of interesting stuff that's going to happen as you guys are listening to this. This game is probably in hours, so everybody have a good time. Enjoy Thursday Night Football, short week. Doug will be back Friday morning. I'll be back Friday morning to recap on our respective shows, whatever goes down in this one. So we will see you all tomorrow, and on you can find me on the postcast. I don't know if you guys have a postcast over in the LA market, but we will see you when we see you. Take care, everybody.